And we are back. And I am so excited about this interview. I am really excited about this interview. This amazing woman who I don't even know. I think you know how much I think you're so amazing,
Oh,
Gail.
I can feel it.
Seriously. Seriously, I think in my, in my closet, you're like my godmother. Like, she's like my god queen. It's not even mother's like god queen.
I love it.
So those of you who are listening, this week we have Gail Cruise-Roberson with us, and she is a dear friend of mine, and mentor, and like I said, God Queen. So how are you? How are you doing?
I am good. I am home. I am in reasonably warm weather, and so spring is coming, for which I'm grateful. So I'm good.
See, we got teased in Chicago. At the time of us pre-recording this, Chicago was like glorious last week, and then it snowed. Was it yesterday or day
Yeah,
before? Yeah.
yesterday. Mhm. I remember those days, and I don't miss them.
Oh my gosh. I just like I can get out of here. But anyway, we could go on and on about weather. Today, in this next 30, 40 minutes, we're gonna explore a lot of, well, I hope a lot of your golden nuggets, of just how you're treating life after 40. I am certain it will be inspirational to others. But before I kind of dig into that, I want to read something to you so you can just sit back and relax. And it's very short, but I want to read this to you. Gail Cruise-Roberson is the co-director of the SEED project, which stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, and is a social justice organization that has been in existence for 37 years. Gail grew up in Jamaica, New York, in a four-generation extended family, has been partnered for 38 years, and is the mother of three daughters. She has spent her work life as an adult educator, working with parents and community members in support of improved educational outcomes for learners of all ages. To know Gail is to know her calm demeanor, inspirational energy, and empathetic nature who continuously spreads wisdom, love, and light to others. So, Gail, how did that feel hearing that? Right back to you.
It was a warm hug. It was really,
Ah.
really. It's like, who is that person? Okay, good. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's funny. I ask our guests to send us their bios, and the majority of that was what, I may rearrange things, but I was like, I gotta talk about how warm she is. And she's not gonna say that in her bio. I'm a warm, calm, empathetic person. I know you're not gonna say that, but I want to hear from you. The Gail that you know today, has
Mhm.
this always been the Gail that, or did something really shift that kind of brings you to who you are right now?
I think that I very much am a product of the women who raised me, my grandmother and my mother. Both of them were pretty grounded women, practical, clear eyed. My grandmother was really the one who stayed home and raised me while my mother worked.
Mm.
And I think that she was probably more blunt than I am. But between her honesty and my mother was a social worker, so she was much more of a listener, much
Mm.
more of a empathetic person. So when I would get on my soapbox, she would ask a few key questions like, have you thought of the other person's point of view?
Mm.
And now that they're not physically present with me, I feel like I carry their energy inside of me, and I think that's what is experienced by people.
Yeah. I,
So,
I was
it's
just about to say, you just described yourself.
there are women sitting on my shoulders who formed me.
I love that. And really, seriously, I think this is why I do connect, and I think why people connect with you. Because listen, the Seed organization, I am a leader, also a trained leader, a part of Seed. So I'm a part of Seed. That's how we met,
Yep.
was through Seed years and years. Oh my God. So my son is almost 17. So I always added up from there because I had just had him.
Yeah, 2004. So next year will be 20 years.
Yes. Oh my
Mhm,
gosh. So yeah,
mhm.
so and the thing that I think others when I talk to others who know you, because we have a lot of interesting kind of 3 degrees of connection. I'll meet people and realize like, oh,
So,
but the common I guess, thought and words that are always shared. Oh, Gail, like she's so warm, but so honest and direct. So, it's not like this. Sometimes you can get that warmth, but it can be a little, you know, okay, we're just kind of saying. But I think that's, there's always you're really direct on that. So I want to rewind a little bit. And if you don't, you just had a birthday. Are you one that does not share your age? Because we always let people.
no, I am not that one. My grandmother was my biggest, I'm telling you, she was a huge role model and she never tired of telling people exactly how old she was. I'm 68 years old and I earned every year of it.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh, you are. That means you're inching. Okay, so we gonna
I'm
get
way
down to the
over
line.
40.
No, but you're approaching 70, and I think it's so rare, I know in my life that I get to talk to other Black women who are approaching 70 and hear from them.
Mhm,
And that's not my grandmother or my aunt or my mom or that just,
right.
women who are living in this world. And so I'm really happy you disclosed that because I know that our listening audience ranges literally from 17 all the way up, honestly,
Mhm,
when I'm looking at the analytics. So I think it's rare we get to hear from Black women who are approaching their 70s and who are living these inspiring lives. But if you had to rewind, okay, so let's rewind. Let's think of I don't want to say little Gail, but let's say Gail who maybe in her 20s 30s. Who was that woman then? Who was that woman in her 20s and 30s?
Well,
Yeah.
the 20s were definitely a time of exploration socially. So
Mm.
I was having a great time. I lived at home and had my own space in the house and was partying every weekend as much as possible. My first serious job I had when I was about 18, I started college, and that job for me was really pivotal because it wasn't a really serious job, but it was a job where I was surrounded by gay men. I was working in the village,
Oh,
West Village, and
okay.
I had an opportunity to rearrange my homophobia, shall we say? Uh,
I love
so
the way you said that. Rearrange. Let's rearrange that. Okay.
yes, get rid of some, biases that I didn't really know I had until I was
Mm,
in a space that was not familiar to me. And they taught me so much about joy,
mm,
about alternative ways of being male, which gave me
mm.
an opportunity to be calm and comfortable in my space. They were the first men that I had ever met who enjoyed being with me, but not in a
Yeah.
transactional arrangement.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that 18-year-old experience has stayed with me ever since.
Mm.
So in my 20s, I was hanging out with friends as much as possible. We danced every week, midweek, weekend.
Right.
I was not thinking about nesting or settling down,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
probably how I ended up nesting and settling down. It wasn't on my radar.
Ah.
My partner made a compelling presentation,
Mm.
and that's how it ended up.
I was gonna say, so I mentioned in the intro that, you've been partnered, I wanna say did I say 38 years? Is that what okay. So you have been in a partnership, obviously this is a committed long-term partnership, and I haven't been able to tap heavily into this with guests that we've had so far,
Mhm,
in how you still maintain you when you're in these partnered spaces.
mhm,
And, obviously, if you're saying 68, we do the math, you're around 30, probably when you began this. What have you had to do? Because, yeah, I haven't been able to ask anybody this. What have you had to do to remain you
mhm.
while still in this partnership? Because this is a part of that finding your voice, knowing who you are,
Right.
partnering can cause a lot of things. So,
Yeah, I just remember when I was witnessing friends of mine who got into committed relationships. They dropped their women friends with a quickness that was painful.
Mm,
I vowed never to do that.
mm,
I have a good
mhm.
friend, and she's, I have to keep remember you're married. You don't act like a married woman. And I take that as a compliment. I'm sad that it is not more frequently manifested, but I think one of the
Mm,
things that I learned fairly early on, probably from a book, was two
mm,
things. One, you should not, despite all the fairy tales we were all exposed to, don't expect your partner to satisfy your every need for companionship, intimacy, shared experiences and interests, all of that. Once you get away from that, then you begin to be able to make relationships with other people, men and
mm,
women, depending upon your network,
mhm.
who you can have experiences with that don't threaten your primary relationship, but don't pressure your primary relationship into doing things they don't want to do. I'm
Right.
not interested in sports, but that's his thing. He's not
Yeah.
interested in the theater, so I don't drag him unless it's something really compelling.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
works,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and that's, I mean, it's such a mature way to look at relationships. And I think unfortunately, society, like you said, I mean, we don't really get to witness in mainstream spaces mature relationships that show, that show that. And I know for me, had I witnessed that more, and understood that more, yeah, I probably would have made a lot of different decisions. And it's taken me to being now 50 to now design a relationship that is one of that maturity and that recognizes, we don't have to, we're singular people who are coming together, in a partnership. And now you talked about being raised with mostly women. Was did you see that modeled where that, I don't know if it's with father or with uncles, or how did you even know kind of to do that, or have that inside of you, or was that modeled for you anywhere?
In hindsight, I would say it was modeled for me. My father and mother stayed together until I must have been in my mid 20s.
Mm,
And my
mhm.
father, both of them are first gen Americans. Both of them were born in Harlem Hospital.
Oh,
You know, just
wow.
But my father was taken back to Jamaica, which is where a lot of the family is from, and was raised there.
Mm,
And he was extremely gregarious.
mm.
So he spent, as much time with his friends as humanly possible. My
Ah,
mother was much more introverted, and she was a bridge player. So she had her crew,
yeah.
but very different in terms of their interests. And so, in hindsight, I would say that's probably where I observed it first, that
Mm.
you can coexist without, being chained at the wrist.
Notice how you said chained. I mean, it's funny. I sit now, and I have so many questions about marriage, not so much relationship and partnership, but getting out of a long-term marriage really, the PTSD. I mean, and I don't mean to say that like that, but for me, because it wasn't a situation that felt very healthy for me, it really does leave me a lot of questions. So it's inspiring to meet other Black women who have been partnered for long term
Mhm.
and who are comfortable in that space, and are, obviously relationships have all kinds of layers and ups, downs, and things, but the whole time I've known you, it appears, yes, you are very, I can see why your friend said that. Because, but I guess because I knew you as a married woman. So I didn't, and I've had an opportunity to meet your husband. So it didn't, but I could see that, just a lot of independence. So,
There's one other thing that I think really made sense to me after a couple of years. There's a saying, and I don't know if I'll get it right, but there's it's sort of along the lines of, in your marriage, you will marry different people, but the two individual bodies are the same, but people change.
yes,
And one of the
yes.
books that I read early on was Gail Sheehy's Passages.
Mm,
And she
mm-hmm.
talked about a lot of relationships hit the rocks after maybe 20, 30 years, when the woman has spent her time nurturing family while the husband is off doing his professional thing. And
Mhm.
then he becomes one who wants to, spend time being a nurturer. And the woman is like, you know what? I did what I had to do. I'm out.
Right.
And there's a big break right in there, right?
Yes, yes.
If it's not something that you understood was going to happen and have plans to figure out how to negotiate, that's where a lot of
Mm.
relationships go south because they're
Absolutely.
divergent.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in that I'm at that 50, and I think a lot of my peers and, people my age are at that 20-year, 25, 30-year
Mhm.
part of marriage. And yes, you see a higher level of divorce rate, I think because of everything you just said. I mean, there can be a lot of other factors, but I see women just hitting this age, after 40, 50, somewhere in there, of realizing, wait a minute, who am I again? and and I need to go and find her, where I think a lot of the men that I know are being kind of standing there like, say, wait, what? Like, I've worked this hard, or per se, we're finally financially in a more stable space. We finally don't have our kids. Like, what do you mean now?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's when you have to recommit somehow.
exactly. 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 So speaking of kids, you have 3 daughters.
Mhm.
Hoo-hoo.
I should clarify,
Ah,
I gave birth to two.
uh-huh.
The oldest one is Stefan's child from another relationship, and she was
Gotcha.
raised by her mother in the Netherlands. But
Gotcha.
as I mentioned, I lived in a 4-generation household. My father had a wife prior to my mother's
Mm,
relationship, so I had sisters that I never considered half sisters. I always treated them as full sisters, and I made sure to do that with mine. So that's why I
yeah.
claim 3, although I gave birth to 2.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Because when I read that, I was like, I said, well, I no, and I kind of thought, I'm like, no, I think maybe, her husband has a
Mhm.
child from a previous relationship. So this whole child raising and still keeping Gail. So there was one thing of doing that, which you kind of explained in terms of partnering and keeping.
Mhm.
Has it how have you been able to continue to nurture and maintain Gail while raising children? Because I this is a hard one.
Mhm.
This is a really hard one, but your thoughts.
Well, I think that I had help initially.
Mhm.
Um, my mother was around. She wasn't a child person per se. My mother and mother-in-law was absolutely a child person.
Mm,
But I had a
mhm,
lot of support when they were young, not necessarily hands-on, but just people I could talk to,
mm,
to be able to make sense of things. I think one of
mm,
the challenging things was when they were young. Well, when we first got married, we lived in Brooklyn. We lived in Fort Greene
mm.
and Clinton Hill, which, that my heart is still there. But we moved
Yeah.
to the New Jersey suburbs. And living in the suburbs was harder for me than raising children. I, I am not a suburban person. And so, I think I had this fantasy that people were friendly in the suburbs and neighborly. And what I
Yeah.
discovered was that's not applied across the board.
No, it is not. Not
And
at
actually,
all.
Brooklyn was more friendly than the suburb that we moved to. The day we moved in, my next door neighbor knocked on the door, not to welcome us, but he thought we were robbing the house. This is day
Oh,
one.
wow. Day 1. Wow.
So,
Wow.
I mean, we ended up making friends with some other neighbors who, were very warm and really part of our family. But that initial one was like, are we sure we're going to live here?
Maybe we need to move. We only been here a day. Let's
So that
wow.
had a lot, it's like, okay, we're living here for the children. It's not for me. But then I met I made a friend who worked in Newark. So our suburb was an inner ring suburb of Newark,
Okay.
and so I was able to find myself as a working woman as a result of starting to work in Newark and having
Mm,
the kids as they got older. They were in school, they were in aftercare, and so there was a rhythm. I
mm.
think probably the teenage years were the most challenging, I think, for me. And it wasn't because they were, like classic teenagers, but
Yeah.
they were finding their own personalities enough that I had to do more negotiating, and
Yeah.
I've read a ton of books. What you see behind me is 1/10 of the books that I read to figure out how to make of the, it's like an owner's manual. How do I raise this
Yeah.
children
How do you
who
raise
don't
this
respond the way I responded when my grandmother and mother said, "This is what we're doing." Okay.
Right. 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 No, I parenting, I mean, for me, parenting is so funny. You said, and I also, I currently live in the suburbs, and it had to really grow on me big, big, big time. Cause I was the same way. The difference was I moved to a predominantly Black suburb.
Hmm.
And so I think that was just it's a very different temperature. I don't think that equals perfection or it was just great because I'm Black, but it was a different temperature. And at least it was of a space where there was some familiarity with that. And many of us were living in the burbs for the first time. And many of us were trying to kind of have these small kids and all the things like so there was community within that, but still having that distance from, the city,
Uh-huh.
which, in terms of access and activity and just energy, yeah, that was really
Hard.
challenging for me. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, but honestly, for me, raising children by far has been my hardest job by far. But what's really interesting, and you can tell me if this was your experience or not, but for me, raising my children is what was probably one of the most pivotal parts of me finding my voice.
Mhm. 'Cause they'll watch
Because
you.
and my kids, my oldest, it is funny. I was just listening to I mentored, I think you've probably seen now if we haven't talked. I'm doing a lot of astrology now. I've always been a
Yes.
student of astrology. That's always been a really big passion of mine, but I'm just now really digging and becoming more public about it. But one of my mentors, I was listening to him and he was describing one of the placements that my oldest son has, which is going to sound really abstract. But anyway, his moon is in Scorpio. And that means a lot. Okay. And in the world of astrology, that means a whole lot. And I knew from my soul when that baby came out, I'm like, nah, nah, nah. This baby has another, this baby got another energy. I never had a baby before, but I've seen babies. And this baby is a warrior. Like he is coming here to like do something different. And how challenging that is raising, because not because something is wrong with him, but because of energetically. So it just required me to check myself
Absolutely.
way more so I don't know. Did your children help give you voice to claim yourself more or?
I think yes, their challenges to my way of thinking forced me to get clear about what I valued and what I was willing to let go, in order to preserve relationship and in order to, not become irrational in my
Mm,
demands.
mhm, mhm,
Um, but, I think I had to do a lot of unpacking of messages that I got, gender
mm.
messages, because I had all girls, you have boys.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's even more that they're watching you and critiquing. They're not
Mhm.
buying it necessarily, they're critiquing. Uh,
Yeah.
but they are much more fearless than I was.
Mhm.
So I look at them and I wonder, where did you come from? Did I do that? I'm not.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, I think that's what our kids come here to do, to teach us about ourselves. And yeah, please, by far, psh, my oldest, I mean, he's only 20 right now, but the things he's currently, I'm just like, okay, Jesus, take the wheel, and he knows that I feel like that. He knows that he's got a lot of destiny. So, okay. Well, I want to kind of pivot a little bit
Okay.
into, we talked about 20s, 30s, having the children and so forth. You mentioned being 68. What at this point of your life, like, is life what you kind of imagined it to be? Or what about this part of life that you're like, whoa, or is there that in this part of life?
I think that having work that I absolutely love and having adult children that don't require the financial investment that they
Mm,
required earlier, they're way more, they're self-sufficient at this point,
yeah.
created a lot of space and time to think about the next chapter. And
Mm,
so, I'm at a point where if I decide I want to go see a play
mhm.
today, I go.
Right.
I don't have to say, okay, how much money do I have? Can I afford?
Yeah.
And the other big thing is, who can I invite to go with me? Because in my earlier days, I wasn't comfortable just going out by myself.
Mm,
It's like people eating alone in restaurants. You have to
right.
learn to appreciate your own company. I'm
Yes.
there now. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who are like, why didn't you tell me you were going? What was wrong with you? You're like, you know what? Go watch it yourself and then we can talk about it later, because the aggravation of coordinating schedules with other people
Yes.
takes all the pleasure out of it.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Not
It's
doing it.
not that I don't love you, but there's
Exactly.
just sometimes I just, even just coordinate all that. I'm just gonna go ahead and see it. It's nothing against you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I must say, I love seeing your group photos with all of your friends, and I'm like, that must have taken some work.
Well, it's funny because my friends will tell me, "You're so good at trying," and but I don't know. I mean, there's certain for me, I'm at a stage of life where I'm really craving a little more, female bonding, unlike what you did in your marriage, where you made it a point. I think I was one of those chicks who left the friends on the side. I'm like, I'm so sorry, friend. So and
But
I
that's
don't
the
think
trap. I mean, that's the you talk about energetic, magnetic energy. That's where most of us end up, because that's what we've seen.
yeah.
And actually, sometimes people get punished for trying to maintain both, particularly if the partner is feeling neglected.
Yes.
Uh, you know,
Yes.
so
For sure. For sure. No, and as I'm building new relationship and partnering with someone new right now, I have been very deliberate in, let me reach out to this girlfriend too.
good.
Let me reach out to, if I'm going to be in this area and I have time, because sometimes I don't. Let me make a point of doing this, because I don't know how intentional at all I was. I mean, I still hung out with girlfriends when I was married, but this is a different season. So yeah. You mentioned, I have a couple more questions and I see my clock winding down. I actually have way more questions. But I want to talk about Seed for a moment, which is the organization that you co-direct, and this is how we met. And it's been such a special, you know, really, Seed was special when I did it with you as a leader and I was a participant. Now that I've become a leader, it has become such a special part of my career and
That's good.
such a special part of my role at the university, that
Mhm.
I work at. And if you really watch my career or really watch me, I'll occasionally mention that I work at a university. It's not something that I put on full blast on
Mhm.
social media, but it has really, honestly, Seed has been the nugget to really lock me in with the university. And not because not it's not a golden handcuff. It's unique, it's different, and I'm bringing something to a very traditional space in a safe way. So I'm going to let you kind of describe what Seed is, what the organization is about, and I'd love to know more about what drew you into it.
Sure. Well, I'll start with that, because it was really to preserve my sanity as a suburban mom
Mm,
who I had, joined a group of parents who were doing conflict resolution, resolving conflict creatively, because
mm.
the school was teaching kids, when you have a conflict, you do not beat the crap out of the child. And parents were saying, "Oh no, when somebody messes with you, you jack them up."
You
So
gonna beat him?
get them in agreement. But one of the other moms in there was Emily Stile, who is one of the founders of Seed. And she said, I think you would be a good facilitator. So I'm having this
Mm,
training and I would love you to join. I had no idea what Seed was, because I'd never been in a group. Right.
yeah, yeah.
And it was life changing, because, to have the opportunity to be in a retreat for 7 days. I think it was 7 or 8 days we had, and to look at ourselves through the lens of race, gender, sexual identity, class, ability, religion, country of origin, all of those things. Nobody ever asked those kinds of questions, much less put them in the context of how systems that operate around us are either giving us benefits or oppressing us, depending upon that intersectionality of identity.
Right.
So that was 1994. And that really has helped me to navigate everything that I've done since then. So, life in this suburb was more bearable because I was doing work that put me in contact with other people who wanted to talk about serious stuff. Because I had experienced a lot of people who were, for lack of a better word, socially vacant.
Yeah.
Didn't want to talk about much of anything. And then when we moved from New Jersey to Illinois, and ended up living in Oak Park, Illinois for several years. And I was able to introduce it to the school district there, which gave me a way, other than standing on the schoolyard trying to connect with other moms, which I tried that. It didn't. This was a way to actually have my values and my desires for not just my children, but other people's children to, take root in a way that they hadn't experienced. Because, of course, they pride themselves on being very diverse and, very fair. And they have done some things, but this was an opportunity to actually have teachers think about, how are they matching what they say they're doing with what's actually happening in classrooms of mixed students. So what we do, how we deliver that work is by having people go initially to be trained. Institutions send people, so we try not to encourage consultants to come and take the work and then go off and do it. So people come to be trained. They go through a process like the one that I've described. And the commitment that the participants make is that for the next year at minimum, they will facilitate a peer group of their colleagues, taking them through the exercises that we share in training that have to do with who are you? How do you show up in the world? How, in the case of teachers, what kinds of spaces are you creating and how do they convey power? What is your philosophy consistent with your behavior?
Yes.
And if it isn't, how can we make them become aligned? It's communal. It builds community, so people have accountability partners. They're not just sent off to do this by themselves. And I think that the spaces that we're able to create are so different from what people are used to when they hear the word professional development. They're like, nobody ever asked me those questions before.
Yeah.
And they'll stay. Now that's not to say that it's for everybody, because we're in a climate right now, I don't have to tell you, where people are losing their jobs. Trying to do work that has to do with creating equitable spaces, which I don't know of anything that's more 1984 than that.
I know. It is. It really, really is. And thank you for sharing how the organization goes about this, because I think that's what's so unique. And when I attempt, to tell people about SEED, I'm like, it's in the how though, guys. It's in the how. And I know I'm giving you this long kind of title of what it is, but what's so unique about it is how we're delivering this information and allowing people to reflect on their own lives and their own. There are no spaces where we're asked all of these identity questions, wrapped in with our peers. So it's a really special place. So thank you for, I had no, like it really kind of blindsided me becoming a leader. George Floyd happened and I saw my students going it was just really challenging. And, I'm using my counseling, skills, but I knew this was an identity situation. Like we got to start talking more about identities and the intersections of them. And so I ran to Gail and said, Gail, I need a consultant in Chicago to go talk to my students. And, we kind of coordinated. I think you and Patricia Savage Williams, both of you were like, or Williams, is it Patricia Williams Savage or Savage
Patricia
Williams?
Savage Williams.
Yeah, Savage Williams. Both of you kind of like hinted, well, you could become a trainer where you can handle, these issues going on in your institution. It's like, oh, I guess I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, that's the thing that is, challenging for people to understand. We're not in the business of going out and making presentations. We're in the business of giving people the tools to do it themselves with their colleagues.
Yes.
Because who better to name what it is that the issues are at an institution than the people who are there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been a really beautiful experience. And I've been able to do it with not just our faculty, but because I'm at a university, also with our students. And it's been a really special for the students too, because they're getting to know their classmates in ways that they otherwise never would have, especially in science, in health science.
Yeah. And, to contextualize it, we're talking about Chicago, where, the space is a contested space for many people. I had never understood it until I lived there, how much it means, where are you from? Where do you live? And a whole profile is developed based on what you say. And you have the potential to be either buttonholed or you'd have to break out of it. And so for them to get this kind of an opportunity means that they're free.
Yeah. I love it. We could go on and on, but I'm looking at my clock. And so we are going to do a bonus, but before we do a bonus, I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
One is if someone is interested, if they work in an educational space and they're interested in learning more about SEED, what's the best way to get information? Should they follow you? Give all the goods of how they can get involved in that.
We have a website. It's nationalseedproject.org. And it has a lot of information about how to apply, but it also has testimonies from people who have felt that it has been useful to them. It's in the process of being reconstructed, but it's very accessible right now. And we have trainings coming up this summer in California in person, and then a virtual training that we're doing right now, and then another virtual training in the fall. So if somebody were interested in actually thinking about it for themselves, they're within the time frame to apply. April 30th is the deadline for applications for the summer, and for the fall we'll extend the deadline. But for people who have the opportunity to be in person, that is really the preferred way to do it.
Yeah. I did it again in the smack dab of the pandemic. So I did it virtual. It is so funny because now my brain is so used to facilitating in a virtual way. I'm like, how would I do this in person? I don't know, but I'm working on, converting that to both, in person and virtual. So awesome. And last question. I think it's my last one. No, I really want to ask you this other question. So I got 2 more questions and then that's it. And then we'll go to the bonus.
All right.
What are you most looking forward to at this point of your life?
Well, in the immediate future, I'm looking forward to my daughter, my first daughter that I gave birth to, getting married.
Congratulations.
Yeah. My girls, none of them have had any interest in marriage per se. And I think that's a topic that we need to discuss all on its own. And I certainly have not pressured them because it's a lot of work, as we know.
Yes.
But her decision to do that has, been something that she's been thinking about for a good chunk of time. And, each of them are fiercely independent. So I think that, that is not a yoke as much as an opportunity to create a family.
Yeah. Very nice.
So that's kind of exciting. And then I think for myself, probably by the end of this year, I will be moving from co-director to like a senior advisor for the organization, because as we've seen with the government, there comes a time when leaders need to step aside and mentor younger leaders before dementia kicks in.
Stop.
I was watching poor Diane Feinstein.
Oh,
Mm,
oh, oh my gosh.
these
Well,
these Supreme Court judges who should
yeah.
probably step
Oh,
aside.
it's just don't get me started. Just I don't talk a lot. I really don't see. I mean, I've called this honestly since I guess probably once Trump announced he was first running. So
Mhm.
whatever year that was, I 20
Thanks.
yeah.
Mhm.
I knew at that point, okay, so in fact, this system we have in place is not a system we're going to be able to keep. So I just feel like we're watching in live time. I don't know, just
Fall of the Western Empire. Yeah,
yes, I really yeah.
dramatic. Yeah.
I hate
Mhm.
to say it that dramatically, but I
Mhm.
really kind of feel like that. And I'm just trying to kind of understand, have a better understanding of the world. I know for me personally, this is why I have been traveling a lot more in a
Mhm.
variety of places inside and outside of the United States so that I can better understand just how I want to live and cultivate my family and whatever connections. Is this the space? Because and it's like, no, I mean, I appreciate where I live. As I'm actually very appreciative of living in Chicago and all these places, but there is a but and a and.
People are
So
moving. People
yeah,
are
yeah.
relocating, to other places and settling in rather well, I must say.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when you start going and I mean, economically, it's almost a no-brainer. And
Mhm.
then when you begin to see how people, their quality of life and in fact, the rhythm of life, the cadence of life, the culture of life in other places outside of the United States, it for me, it's really impact. It would be crazy of me not to consider living, in other places.
Well,
Yeah.
it's another one of those fairy tales where, we've been led to believe that we are all knowing and we have
Mhm.
the best system in the world. So to discover that there are people living their lives happily without any concern about this country is, not too many people realize that's happening because they never leave home. But
Exactly. Oh, Gail, that's a whole nother okay, so one, we just need to sit down and talk. But two, that's a whole nother episode, Lord.
yeah, I'm afraid
All
so.
right. My last question, this is a fun one. And I did put it as a question. This is probably the only question that I did give you that I actually asked. But is what what is a theme song? What's a song that you just love or that just motivates you? If you need to say more than one, you can. But what's a theme song?
Well, that was a no-brainer because, the pandemic is like the central theme of so many things. But, during the pandemic, John Coltrane was on repeat. I would listen
Mm,
every day, every day. So, Love Supreme is what I would call my theme song in terms of, what do I never tire of hearing.
I love it.
And the sentiment is also
Mhm.
a really key part of it. And so, it behooves me to be reminded that love is the driving factor despite all of the fear and ignorance that, keeps seeping out of, the zeitgeist. If I
Yeah.
stay focused on love, and I don't mean the mushy kind,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the I love you, so I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and we're going to continue to be in relationship.
Right.
That love.
Right. Right. I love it. Love Supreme. You never can go wrong with that song. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. More things need to be titled Love Supreme because that's such an amazing title. But anyway, well, thank you so much. We're gonna continue. Those of you, if I told y'all she was a light, I told you if you didn't feel the light, I don't know what's up with you. But anyway, we're gonna continue in our bonus. I'm gonna ask her two more additional questions and pick her brain and try to offer some advice on some things. So those of you who are interested, make sure you hop over to patreon.com/finding your voice and become a subscriber so you can check it out. Thank you so much, though. I appreciate you for giving this to our public audience. This has been amazing.
This was a
Amazing.
joy to listen and to talk with you because
Uh,
I don't see enough of you.
I know. That's why talking to you now, I'm like, okay, I got to do a regular date. This is ridiculous. Anyway, all right. Those who are listening will be back next week. Okay, to our bonus. So I have just two quick questions for
Okay.
you. What advice would you give to Black women who are, and I'm specifically saying to Black women, and the reason I say this, one, you've raised Black women, you
Mhm.
come from generations, you've really mentioned that, that being such a staple in your life, the generations of women in the society we're living in right now, which is all kinds of things, imposter syndrome, you're hearing so much more of that, and women needing to rest and whatever. What is there any kind of pivotal advice that you would give to those women who are embarking, this next phase of life
Mhm.
and having difficulty really stepping in themselves or accepting how life is offering them at this point?
Something that I've noticed about the 40s from my own experience and what I've observed of colleagues, particularly women, it felt like the need to prove myself was at its highest height and the need to be able to do it all.
Mm, mhm,
And it's a trick bag, right? But capitalism does that to us.
mhm,
And so and there are also all these stereotypes about how, on the one hand, we should work twice as hard, but we're supposedly lazy and, you know, not competent. Those two things are not sustainable in the same bodies, okay?
exactly, exactly.
But I don't, aside from recognizing that the 40s are a time where many people feel the need to shoot their best shot, to be all that they can be. Um, I don't know how, without realizing that and taking a different tack, you get through it with, with your brain intact. I mean, me in my
Mhm.
40s, I was running a nonprofit where I had to raise all the money, which,
Mm,
it sounded great on paper, but, sleep deprivation over how to make the payroll is not a good look. And I
right.
ended up having an ectopic pregnancy,
Oh, wow.
which helped
Wow.
me to understand that it was time to exit stage left.
Yeah, yeah.
So I say that to say it's important to pay attention to both the internal signs that you're experiencing, but also to realize that there are a series of fables that
Mm,
we're all exposed to that don't necessarily, they weren't made for us, and they are designed to keep the hamster wheel going.
mm,
And so, you know, obviously we need to eat, we need to have a roof over our heads, we need to have time for recreation and whatnot. But when it becomes the thing that your identity is tied to,
mm.
I think you've lost a little of your own control.
Yeah, yeah.
And but you know, getting to the point where you're postmenopausal, you've heard people say things get really clear,
Yes.
and it's like clockwork, but you can't watch it. I don't know how you accelerate it. It's kind of like you have to go through the punishing
Yeah.
40s to be able to appreciate that it's in the rear view.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is why I'm doing the podcast
Yeah.
because, we're just, to me, I know for just myself, you know, and no disrespect to magazines like Essence or so forth, but I've watched myself age out of, the content to a certain degree. It's like, yeah, I know that. I know what lipstick to wear. I know what hair, I don't really even care. I know that relationship. I'm like, no, I need a next level. I need to hear from that next level. And, slowly I'm getting some small dots, but not anywhere where we need. And so, of course, you know me. Well, start your own podcast, can you? Like start talking to people
There you go.
because it really, this has been such a magical time for me. Like I mean, I just ended my 40s, so I'm starting my 50s. And my 40s actually were really kind of amazing for me because my 30s and 20s were so rough doing a lot of what you just, were saying. And now the 40s were harder in terms of the kind of decisions I had to make.
Mhm.
but I'm seeing that, wow, these 50s, this is about to really be on. Like these things that are like popping up now that I'm like, what? Like this is
The best
crazy.
is right now.
It's crazy. If you're doing I find if you're doing, the self-development, the evolution, the work,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the letting go.
Yeah, well, you had mentioned that you don't get to talk to a lot of people who are approaching their 70s, and I know
Mhm.
that's true. And I also know that, we say that there is wisdom in aging, but then we relegate aging people to, rocking chairs,
Right.
theoretically. But I think one of the things that can help women in their 40s is to be in relationship with older women who they're not related to. See, because there's a
Yes.
lot of baggage with mother, daughter, auntie, whatnot, and I think hearing some wisdom that has been earned by someone who you haven't been fighting with your entire life helps it penetrate. You can hear it a lot better.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think I've emotionally felt that, but I've never articulated that out loud. That's what it is. Because I have aunts who are still alive in their 80s. Like I do come from a line of a bloodline where, my mother is 84. So
Mhm.
that gives you some context. But my grandmother lived to be 88. And so
Yeah.
she was that age at a very, long, long time ago where many people were not living to be, 88. And so, and it was kind of similar. My dad lived to be 86 or 85. And so, but I never thought of like the fact. So I can talk to my aunts and I do, and of course I'm like, oh, Lord, I know where she goes. Okay. Yes. Yes. And occasionally, of course, they will say things. And I'm like, okay, yeah. But to your point, talking to those elders who are not a part of your bloodline. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm.
Since
Wow.
the pandemic started, I have had a 1-hour FaceTime conversation every Saturday morning with Willa Cofield, who you heard about in Seed, who's
Mhm.
93. She's a
Yes.
filmmaker. She's just finished the
Yes.
second film, along with
Wow.
Nancy Livingston, who I met in 1994 in Seed, and we've been friends ever since. And we
Wow.
have just laughed our way through the pandemic and all of the ridiculousness of it. So, I'm 68, one is in their 70s, one is in their 90s. But I
Wow.
also have, women who are younger who now
Yeah.
call me auntie, which I'm thrilled with.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that is really for people who don't read books necessarily. There are books walking around that you can talk to.
Yes. Okay, so now in my head I'm like, okay, Gail, I got two other people that we need to sit down once a month and talk. Okay. All right. Last question. What is a question I didn't ask that you really wish I would have asked? Or what is something you want just people to know about you that you weren't able to share yet?
I guess it has to do with books. When I lived in Illinois, I was thrilled because we had so many bookstores around, and I had such difficulty making meaningful connections with other Black women. For some reason, they heard me speak, and I was threatening to them for whatever.
Mm,
Um, and so I spent a lot of money and time buying books.
mm.
I went to a workshop once and somebody asked, "What do books represent to you?" And I realized in that moment that they were the friends that I wasn't able to find.
Oh, I love that. You got all many quotes. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta write that down. Yeah.
But I think that I thought it was me, which is part of why I had to get out of there because it started to work on my brain. It's like there's something wrong with me that I can't, that the only people I'm able to connect with are not Black women. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is happening?
Right.
But then there was this the Chicago Tribune had written a post. They had a women's section on the Sunday paper, and this woman talked about how she had gone home. She worked in Chicago, but she went home to, I think, Texas or whatever. And
Mhm.
everybody was so happy to see her, and it was amazing. And then when she moved back, none of these women were available to be friends.
Mm.
They were able to make an appearance at an event, but
Mhm.
the fact that for this generation, our generation, and the ones coming up, compared to my mother and her friends where everybody was having kids at the same time. Everybody was getting married at the same time. If they got
Mm,
divorced, that was the outlier, but
mhm.
their life stages were in sync. Ours are not.
No.
There are
Right.
40 somethings who are having their first child with, sitting next to a 40 something who has grown kids, and they're like, what are we
Exactly.
talking about? And then, the workaholics versus the people who are, jet setters. So it's really
Yeah.
difficult to make friends.
Mm,
And so this
mm.
book well, she wrote this article and her email crashed because there were so many women who said, this is my story.
Yes.
She ended up writing this book called The Friendship Crisis, which, like
Mm.
self-care for Black women, I bought and gave away many times.
I'm sharing the self-care for Black women. You don't even know how much. I just shared that on YouTube. Was it last week? Yeah, I was doing a YouTube live. But yeah, the friendship, and I just did a recent episode on friendships after 40, and yeah, it's always been a tough lane for me too, really feeling safe and comfortable in friendships. Because,
And with
yeah,
people who want the best for you as opposed to feeling jealous and competitive.
absolutely. And
That's
really understanding one of the things, I guess, I just always feel like I'm doing a lot. There's a lot about me, and not wanting to be judged that I'm not really in a box. Like I'm out of a box. And that was just always challenging for me to feel like I'm being accepted, for being outside the box. And so that's another reason I've been really intentional recently with girlfriend time, because I'm like, choose the women that you feel safe with, that you can really, be all of who you are and not coming as this small version of you.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I have loved watching your career ever since you were working where you were working when we met, and the risks
Yeah.
that you took, and the faith that you had that the universe would take care of you.
Mm, mhm. Yeah,
And it's been
that's the
powerful.
only way. Well, thank you. Because I mean, and yeah, and again, I think, what I said earlier when we were talking, and then we'll get ready to wrap this up, is, I think my kids, and I don't know how much I really recognized, but they were pulling me in ways that I'm like, if I don't take care of me, of who they were seeing my truth bigger than I was seeing my truth.
Mhm.
And my oldest wasn't scared to tell it. Like he was able to say, to just call me out on things that I'm like, and he still does, he still, he just did a week ago. We just spent a week together, and he called me out on something, and he
You
was
have
right.
mad skills, boy, I tell you.
He was right. And I mean, and my other son, said, yeah, mom. He co-signed. He's the more even kill son, but he's like, yeah, mom, you do kind of do that. And I'm like, I do. That's not good. And they're like, it's okay, mom. I mean, it's okay. And I'm like, wow, y'all really call this out. So wanting girlfriends who could
Yeah.
do that too. You know what I mean? Like, it's finding safety in other women. The fact that my children are having to tell me this, I mean, that's fine. Maybe that's just how I'm supposed to receive it. But yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
awesome.
it's not easy. It is something that does, when we were children in school, everybody was your friend. But you got to be more discerning as things happen because people are hurt. They
Yes.
carry a lot of, and you don't find out about it until they're have the opportunity to celebrate with you and they can't quite pull it together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, all right. So yeah, so Gail and I are we gonna have to keep me, because
Yes.
yes, yes, because we don't get to talk like this. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording for those of you watching. Thank you for listening, and I just can't thank you enough, Gail. I'm gonna have you stay on. I'm gonna push end on this recording, but stay for just a quick moment, and yeah, we'll be back again next week with another dynamic interview as usual. So, thanks everybody.